everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today my topic is about the time. We use time every day. And by the way, I got my research from the Kingfisher Science Encyclopedia. Earlier on, people used to develop time with calendars and many more objects. Let's find more about time. First, calendars are one form of time. In the early periods, people used to tell time with carved stone on the floor. So depending on where the sun is, they could tell the time. These were developed by the Babylonians, and eventually the Babylonians and the Egyptians found out that there is exactly 365 days and 6 hours in a full year. But now we discovered that the more accurate time is 365 days, 6 hours, 41 minutes, and 59 seconds. But the Babylonians and Egyptians were considered very impressive during this time because it was a long time ago, in 2400 BC, or that means before century. Not only is there calendars in the past, there's also different types of calendars that we have developed today or in the past. One of the first ones was the Julian calendar developed by Julius Caesar in 46 BC. And we have not used this calendar recently because it kept going off track. People did not like this because every year it would be not accurate. But the one we use today is the Gregorian calendar. It was developed by Gregory VIII and is a typical calendar. The best part about this calendar, or the most interesting part, is every 4 years there's a leap year where February has a different amount of days. Moving on, the invention of the clock started with ancient Egypt and the sundial. These were one of the main forms of time. So throughout the day, Egyptians would use this to check the time. And depending on where the sun is in the sky, when it rises from the east and sets to the west, the shadow of this sundial will cast on different spots, or the markings. So, for example, this sundial is showing the shadow that's cast this direction. Also, the obelisk was developed a little more than the sundial. And then the obelisk was a very tall structure, and you might be familiar with it because it kind of looks like the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. if you ever visited Washington, D.C. The obelisk was just like a sundial, but it was bigger and taller, so more people could easily read the time. To my left, there is water clocks. These were invented or developed by the ancient Greeks in Rome. And it included 2 water cups. So throughout the day, the water from one cup would fill into another cup. So people carved notches in a cup to see the time of the day. Depending on the time of the day, the water would fill up higher and higher. And lastly, it led us to invent the modern clock, which has different features. In this one, it has an alarm and a silver and a rose gold color. This is a video on the invention of the clocks. And I got this video from Instagram, and this clock was before century, and after that, it became a water clock, and as we started developing it, it became very mechanical, and it soon turned into what the clocks we use now. So these are still in the 1800s, and then in the 1900s, they started looking more familiar with a telephone, and soon it became these just round clocks. The 4 seasons are very important in telling time because this is what farmers used before they had any tool in telling what time it was. Different seasons have distinctive features. For example, winter is very dry, and in some parts of the world there may be snow. Then summer, as in this picture, is very sunny, and there's trees, there's often lots of greenery. Spring is very distinctive because after a long and harsh dry season, suddenly there's a burst of color, like these pink flowers shown in my spring picture with the man sitting on a bench. And lastly, fall has all different kinds of colors of leaves, and the leaves start to fall. We have seasons because of the Earth's tilt. The Earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees at the top corner. The reason why we have seasons is when the sun beams on our Earth, our Earth is tilted on an axis, so the northern hemisphere gets a different amount of sunlight than the southern hemisphere. So in this picture, you could probably guess that the southern hemisphere is encountering summer while the northern hemisphere is encountering winter because the southern hemisphere is receiving more sunlight. Moving on, the length of the days will vary depending on the parts of the years. So when you begin the year, you probably begin with the year with winter and slowly develop into spring. And right now, it's March, so we have just entered our spring season. There's the summer solstice and the winter solstice in the years. The summer solstice will begin on June 21st in the northern hemisphere and December 21st to 22nd in the southern hemisphere. The reason why they're opposite, or because the northern hemisphere is having or receiving different amounts of sunlight than the southern hemisphere. So this is why all of these days are opposite. So when one part is encountering its summer solstice, the other part is encountering its winter solstices. And in between are the equinoxes. My family has just encountered our spring equinox, which is usually in about March 20th. There's also the fall equinox, which is right in between the winter and summer solstice. The winter and summer solstice are the longest and shortest days of the years. So the longest day of the year is the summer solstice, when the sun shines on a part of the planet the longest, and the winter solstice is when there's not as much daylight because the sun doesn't get direct angles. Lastly, I'm going to talk about some fun facts about time. For example, when we look at galaxies through telescopes, we are actually not looking at the present galaxy. Instead, we are looking at galaxies that formed 50 million years ago. So it would be another 50 million years from now to see what these galaxies actually looked like in the present. I think this is very cool because it takes such a long time for time to travel to our galaxy from another. Also, the open lattice clock will only lose a second in about 40 billion years. And when I researched, this clock was invented by a Colorado institute. And in almost 40 billion years, it won't even lose a second. This is used to show our internet time and more. So all the watches or the digital watches like my Apple Watch show the time that's with the lattice clock. And lastly, pennies are used sometimes to adjust the time on the Big Ben. You might be wondering, what's the Big Ben? The Big Ben is London's biggest clock, and you can see it from the cities of London. And the pennies, every time you drop a penny near the mechanical part, the minute hand will or the hands will slightly adjust to a little farther time, so it might gain a little bit of a second. And in conclusion, I think time is very important. So in the future, we might have developed better clocks than now, but now I think that time is very important because my family has to use time and calendars to track events, and time is for everyone to know if they're on the right track. Thank you for listening. I hope you like and subscribe to my channel.